Gippa is very close to my heart. And as I shared with you earlier today, I am an example of a covertly prescribed lacing that took place in a very vulnerable stage of my life where trust was something that I felt was already accomplished. Like, how much can you trust a neighbor? How much can you trust a person who you've helped before and they've helped you as well? Why would you not trust? The initiative was something that after I released my book, I started getting downloads that related to some of the things that were hidden or tucked away in my heart space because either I had no outlet to talk about them or because I was too embarrassed or because whatever the situations were, there was a reason for it. But this information is vitally important. And remember the number 73,000. 70 to 80%, according to the CDC. And that's something we're going to go over today. So, welcome and thank you so much. Dr. Dorina Shine's journey is very profound, and a lot of people may not understand everything that I have gone through. But the GIPA Global Initiative Intervention and Prevention Act of 2025 is a mission that helps people tell their story, get their stories heard, because it's a platform where not a lot of people even care to hear what happens because, number one, it's so hard to believe they don't even want to go there. So that's what this mission is for. And it's also to bring light to those people who covertly prescribe without a license drugs or mixtures of chemicals, not knowing what will happen to the person and not knowing what reactions that may result from that. And I'm not saying that everybody is innocent. No, we are not victims here. That's the first thing I want you to understand. Accountability is the number one rule of law and the mission of the GIPA initiative. What I'm saying is that when you know better, you do better. You become a better version of yourself because you have worked on your better circumstance. Now, as explained in the book, I was a product of a covertly prescribed lacing at a time in my life where everything should have been perfectly fine. I never should have been in a position to have to survive an attack of an unlicensed activity. And that is something that I came to know about, and I wanted it to be put out in the public's arena to let people know the severity of why this initiative is so valuable. Addiction allows for excuses. And then when you combine different types of pills, alcohol, or mixtures within marijuana, or any other influence that can be conjured, that right there makes people behave differently. So the covert prescribing changed my life in ways that I couldn't even imagine. Some of the things that took place, the way the criminal activity of fighting and arguing and the debate of life, not knowing I was under a influence, that is very eye-opening. And I want you to pay attention to that because everyone just experienced exactly what I did that day that changed my life forever. We can go sit down and have dinner already made, and we never know what's inside, what's been mixed in, what's been, you know, not saying to be paranoid, but to be very aware, very conscious, and very trusting to the people in which we should allow in our lives. There's a lot of dark deceit, there's a lot of jealousy, there's a lot of envy in people. And when you realize that, you have to take the initiative to protect yourself. Ignorance is not a defense in this situation. That's why we deal with the consequences. We handle whatever consequences come behind our unknowing or our ignorance is where we hold accountability. And then from that point, we start making the decision to make the change for our lives. And that is what heals us. That is what puts us into a healing version. Now, many intellectual people in the world survive hidden agendas on their lives. People must be very discerning because the things that man feel about us when they smile in our face, but in their minds, they're throwing the swords behind our backs, the ten of swords. They're just putting all the swords right in our backs. Okay. But we can still survive from that. Making sure to know who to trust, not taking life for granted. Everything is not a party. And when you're a certain age, it just looks crazy. It looks a little insane. And so it makes you wonder, has this thing been happening the whole time? Have we created a legacy for our lives to just, force us to be in that position where we have to indulge much because the pain has overtaken the immunity of how much medicine we can take. So we take double, triple, quadruple the amount that's covertly prescribing. Even overdosing or taking more than one or two pills recommended by the pharmacist or physician, that is still covertly lacing because you're manipulating the outcome. And then the immune system does not know how to keep up with that. And then here comes the body, being human, shutting down. Amazing, simply amazing. So we have to know our weakness. What is our weakness? And look at the statistical breakdown: 73,000 people overdosed. And these are just reported numbers. We're not even talking about the numbers that never made it to the statistical breakdown. Some people never got reported. Those people are somewhere over there in a world that is full of remember me's. Remember when, remember the time, remember how we used to kick it. But a lot of times, nobody knew fentanyl was in the overdosing. Nobody knew fentanyl was part of the lacing. Nobody knew that fentanyl was in the drug to cut it to make more, just so somebody else can make money to live better. They didn't care about their client base. They don't care about, people who are really genuinely being, just regular random people who have been abused by somebody else's action. That is something else. But I want to share that with you because that is extreme. And that's what GIPA is also about as well. This initiative is going to open your eyes to some things that you never, ever would have even imagined. The numbers don't lie. And GIPA is needed just to understand the epidemic of what truly happens in nightclubs. Let's take an example. So I was in the rooms of recovery, and I remember a guy telling us that he paid a barmaid $100 to lace a lady's drink that was across the bar. And the reason why he wanted to lace her drink with whatever pill was because he wanted to take her home and take advantage of her. Now, we hear about this all the time, and it's really, really popular in big cities and different things like that. But the reality that I want to bring home when it comes down to the initiative is to ask you the question. We know what happened to the guy because the guy went into the rooms of recovery. He did something that he was either forced into recovery to have to face, maybe a DUI or something like that, or he chose to be in recovery because the guilt that he held within his own mindset about what he's done over the course of his addictive timeline. But we never hear about what happened to that lady. We never hear if she had a heart attack and she was just an innocent person going to the bar to get a drink just like everybody else. But we never hear her story. We never hear if he took her home and then threw her away, gave her more, and her heart just stopped and she ended up dying in somebody's alleyway. We never hear her story. And that's the reason why the GIPA initiative is so vital and so important, because we want to hear the stories of survival. Because if you have survived this, you need to tell your story. It is so vital. It is so important, and it helps people get over these obstacles. But we may, many a times, never hear what covertly prescribed lacings can actually do. Hopefully, she did make it through, such, as many of us do. So, why is this important to me? GIPA is very important to me because this initiative is all about survival. It's all about helping me recognize that, I am important. There is a value to me, that life has not broken me down to the point where I just cannot believe in myself no matter what circumstance or situation befalls me. Addiction to recovery is very important. It's a transformation. And it also forces us to problem solve. We can't blame it on the alcohol. We can't do that. We can't blame it on it. We have to help gain control over our own lives. And once we realize that the withdrawals and the symptoms of having to go through the withdrawals is more deadlier at times than staying committed to drinking because of the amount of time that has been consumed over years and years and years, that's when we hit the reality of what addiction versus recovery really truly is. Also, we are not victims here. We are not trying to play a system, beat a system, manipulate a system. We're going to do whatever time the crime or the consequence involves when we don't take accountability for our lives. Ignorance is never a defense in this initiative. So I want you to know that as well. We never really set out to destroy our lives or defeat our success. But a lot of times, when you look at the number 73,000, somebody wasn't thinking about the next day or the next year or the next 10 years. They were thinking about the moment. Put yourself in that position. Think about the moment and what it will look like 10 years from then. The initiative also lets people know that if you truly want help, they will not use the system as an excuse. They will work on whatever they need to work on. And that's the power behind man and woman knowing themselves. You have to know yourself. In order for you to survive this world and this process, you have to know who you are.